And now, a little about our presenters. Danielle Cook is a professional nutritionist and cooking instructor, and her sister, Adrienne Cook, is a gardening and cooking writer. We're excited to have them with us for today's Fall Favorites live online cooking demonstration. So with that, take it away, Danielle and Adrienne.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. I'm Adrienne.
And I'm Danielle. And we are here today to do a couple of recipes involving some of our fall favorites. What does that mean exactly? Well, my goodness, there's a lot to pick from right now in the markets. And I'm going to start today's recipes with a soup, and then I'll turn it over to the indulgent dessert part. But I think you will find, if you've been meandering your local markets, that things are plentiful in the way of things like celery root or celeriac and fennel, which we're going to work with today, these two, and leeks, and plenty of lots of beautiful pears and pumpkins and apples. And
that's what I'm going to be doing today, is pears.
Yes. You're going to work on pears, and I'm going to work on a really kind of nice, unusual soup that I think you should definitely give it a try across the winter months. Lots of great flavor in this one, and a great way to use this wonderful, mysterious root vegetable called celery root. So our soup consists of the soup itself and a topping of shiitake mushrooms, crispy shiitake mushrooms. So we're going to actually start by doing the topping, and then we'll switch over to the cooktop and work on the soup part. So let me go ahead and give us a new angle on things so you can see what I'm going to do here. The topping, which is the shiitake mushrooms, you're going to need a baking sheet with either, I'm putting parchment paper on this, or something non-stick. And just because it's convenient and easy, I like to get these mushrooms already pre-sliced, just a box of 5 ounces or more if you want to do more, but this works perfectly on a small baking sheet. So I'm going to spread them on there, and I'm going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil. My oven, meanwhile, is getting preheated to 400 degrees, nice and hot, because we're going to do like a fast flash roast of them. And today I'm going to use some smoked paprika, and that's going to give these mushrooms just this really great pop of flavor to put on the top of your soup. So if you don't have smoked paprika, which is very not unusual if some of you don't happen to have that in your pantry, you could use a bit of chili powder, or any kind of a blend of the red spices. So take a look at what you might have on hand. That would you could also do regular sweet paprika, but this smoke just gives the incredible flavor to the soup. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of massage all that into the mushrooms. Just a light drizzle. If you over oil them, then they're not going to get really crispied up, right? So you just want to do a light drizzle so that it helps the spices and the salt absorb into the mushrooms. This is a great topping to sort of have on hand, because once you've done them, you can store them at room temperature in a good airtight container for 3 or 4 days. And you can throw them on other things. You know, lots of fall salads that are hefty with great fall greens. These would be great on there too. Okay, so spread them out as best you can on your cookie sheet. Try not to have them too overlapping, and don't have them all dumped on top of each other. Otherwise, they're just going to steam and they're not going to bake, right? And they're going to go into a hot oven for 20 minutes. And while that's going, we will focus on the next thing, which is to prep up our vegetables. Now, this soup is going to have leeks, it's going to have fennel, it's going to have celery root, and also regular celery and garlic in it. The two things that I want to focus on today are going to be the celery to focus on for you to see, watch the prepping, is going to be the celery root and the fennel. And so we're going to use the entire bulb of fennel, and everything's going to be pureed. So we're not going to worry too much about how these pieces look, other than we want them pretty evenly cut down, pretty evenly in size. Get rid of all the fronds. Don't throw this out. It's wonderful in broth, or you can even chop up the other, other parts of it and use it in other dishes, other stews and so forth. So we'll just set those to the side for now. And then this is a beautifully clean, lovely bulb of fennel. Sometimes if you see them, if they're a little bit browned or dried on the outside, you may need to use a vegetable peeler and just peel back. In a real unusual case, if it's super dry, you would remove the whole thing. But there's a lot of fennel in the markets right now. It's a real fall.
This is the season.
This is the season. It is a real fall vegetable. So I'm going to go ahead and just take off the bottom a little bit and remove some of the root. It's actually, this part is not, you can leave it in, but it can be a little bit more tough than the rest of the bulb. So I'm going to go ahead and just take a little wedge of that out and cut this into chunks. And the fennel bulbs are varying in size too, these right now in the markets. So evenly, this flavor, fennel it's got a very mild, lovely mild sort of licorice flavor, but it's actually, as it cooks down, it gets very, very sweet, and it softens and just becomes really very delicious. So we're going to go ahead and put that in the bowl and do the same thing on the other half. This is a great way of using some of the more, I would say, underutilized fall and winter vegetables. Celery root, a lot of people don't have any idea what to do, how to handle it, so we're going to have fun with that in a second. But the combination of the celery root, and fennel is really quite different. Okay. That all looks good. And now for the fun part, this knobby thing. So celery, as you can see, the roots are on the bottom. They've been cut off already, but this is usually just full of gnarly little root ends and big ones. This has just got a couple of little ones left hanging on there. We're going to get rid of all that. And this is the top of the celery root. So it doesn't look quite like the celery that we're used to getting in the grocery store. Kind of does, but these tops are not nearly as, thick. And these are actually not so edible. Wouldn't you say, Adrienne?
The flavor is fine, but the actual stalks are very tough.
Yes. Yeah. So we would not cut those and put them on the crudité platter for Thanksgiving. So we're going to get rid of it entirely.
It has a very strong celery flavor too.
Yeah. And so what do? You just kind of start going at it. Actually, you want to scrub the celery root first to try to release any extra dirt because it's so gnarly in there, things really get caught up in there. So I just go at it with a good knife, and usually it takes a couple of different knives as you get into some of the more difficult, smaller parts. And I just go right down and all the way around. You can do this with a vegetable peeler if you like. It's whatever your comfort level is in terms of what you want to use. But a couple of things here. You want to clear enough so that you're really seeing the white part. You can see some pale green in parts. You want to just cut it back enough so that pale green is gone. So you just have a nice, smooth, white interior. I mean, I would say that whoever decided that this thing coming out of the ground must be really good was a real optimist, wouldn't you say? Looking at what they had tactful to figure out what was really if it was really worth using.
But when you smell it, when you're cutting it, you can really get the smell.
Smells great. Okay, so you can see here there's a root that's kind of in there. We will get to that when we start cutting it into chunks. So that was the easy part. Now, and this one actually is really pretty clean in comparison to sometimes what you can see. Okay, now I'm going to switch over to a little knife just because I feel like I have better control on getting these little roots out with the smaller knife. But that's just my personal preference. And if there are a couple of little pieces or little nubs that get left behind, it's not the end of the world. This whole soup is going to be pureed. So it's not like you're going to be eating chunks of this celery root and realizing, you've got a big piece of root there. Okay. So this, and now we'll chunk it. And I'm going to add it straight into the fennel, the bowl with the fennel, because they're going to go in at the same time into the pot.
Danielle, while you're working on that, can you use a vegetable peeler on this, or is that too tough?
So you could, if you have a really good vegetable peeler. I've always felt that was for me personally, it's been a little bit too difficult to manage. But if you've got a really good, sharp vegetable peeler that you really like, and I've got a couple different models of vegetable peelers, but I would not use a serrated one. If you happen to have one of those that's got a serrated blade, I think that's going to make it really difficult. But give it a shot with a vegetable peeler. What do you use, Adrienne?
Both. I use a vegetable peeler and a knife.
See, so it's really a subjective kind of thing. Okay. Almost done with this part, and then we're going to put it all together. And okay, so this soup, here we go with our little spot of a little nubby. I'm just going to make a little incision and get rid of that. Okay. So this is, the recipe calls for 1 celery root, about a pound, 1 fennel bulb, large or small, either way. It's if they're really small, you could do 2. 1 big fat leek, which I've already prepped up. So it's, it's kind of a pretty easy thing to list of ingredients to remember. Okay.
Danielle,
so,
is the root flesh really fibrous, or is it not too?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Root flesh, the flesh itself feels not unlike a potato. In terms of fibers for the nutritional value, yes. It's also got great source of potassium and magnesium. So there minerals, trace minerals there for this. Okay, so at this juncture, I'm going to get ready to switch over to my cooktop. Are there any questions that anybody has? Any other questions that we want to go over before we?
Yeah, so there was a question about, are celery root and celeriac the same thing?
Are celery root and celeriac the same thing?
Yes, they are.
They certainly are, but they're different. They are different than celery in that they're not the same plant. They are cousins, essentially, to each other.
Celery and celery root, yeah. Celery root and celeriac are used interchangeably for the same. It always refers to this bulbous part of the celery. Yeah, and you grow them quite differently. And the celery that you grow in the garden for celery never develops this root.
Right. You have to grow the celeriac. So the Brits and the Americans that's where the difference in name comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so now let's take a look at what's going on our cooktop. And we're going to finish up this soup and see what we can enjoy. Okay, we've got our ingredients and we've got my pot over here. Getting it warmed up, going to add a little bit of olive oil. And My other ingredients here that are already prepped up is the one big fat celery root, or one big fat leek. Yes, this is going to be the source of what we call the allium, the onion family. We're not putting onion into this. We're going to just put leek and some garlic. So it's going to have a, really what we're trying to do is showcase the flavors of the celery root and the fennel and really make that shine, which this time of year and through the winter, I mean, this is a wonderful digestive soup. Okay, so let's get that started. And our regular celery. And some garlic, a nice big fat clove of garlic. You could go for 2 smaller cloves. If you really like garlic, you can do a little more. But again, you know, we're trying to just balance out these flavors and really showcase what's going on with this celery and celery root.
How many stalks of regular celery are you using?
2 stalks of celery. So we're going to saute that lightly. I'm going to give it a little pinch of salt just to help bring the moisture out into the vegetables. When you're doing this, I'm going to try to, you know, move it along just for our time because of the time constraints that we're on. But when you're doing this at home, you can put a lid on it and let it simmer for a couple of minutes. I'm also going to use today some vegetable broth, and we're going to do a little deglazing with white wine. Now, that is a completely optional step. If you would rather not have any wine in this, that's fine. You can deglaze if you need to with some broth, additional broth. The wine does give it, and I'll let it boil down so that there really isn't any, it's reduced till it's just basically nothing left in there. It's just going to infuse some flavors. The alcohol will not be a factor. When you cook it out like that, it's not going to be a factor. So I'll go ahead and add the wine. And really crank that up on high so it'll bubble away. This soup can freeze very well. So if you have extra, you'll see at the end, we're not gonna be adding any dairy into it whatsoever, no cream. So it's just a great vegetarian, and actually it's even a vegan option for your friends and family. I like having this soup on hand in the winter, in part because it freezes really well. It's just something a little bit different. Okay. Go ahead and add all of our yummy veggies. And then once again, I'm going to go ahead and just pop it with a little salt for the same reason of just getting those vegetables to start sweating. You're going to need about between 4 and 6 cups of broth. Now, if you wanted to do this with chicken broth, that's totally fine. If you have your own homemade chicken broth or veg broth, that's even better. It's going to depend, how much broth is going to depend in part on how big your, how much vegetables they absorb the broth in different measures, depending on how dense the celery root actually is. And you don't know that until you actually get into the cooking aspect of it. So, like I said, this is a vegetable broth. Go ahead and add all that. I'm just going to add enough to cover. And then I'll hold back a little bit of extra for the blending part. So this can now simmer along, and that's going to cook for about, I like to actually cook it for about a good 40 minutes, I would say, covered at a not a roaring boil, but just at a good clip. When it's all done, you can see that this one has been simmered for quite a while, and then I left it covered to let it cool down. The color is quite different, right? You can see the difference in color. For all the green from the celery has faded, and it's taken on more of a yellow sort of hue. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and blend it. And once it's blended, you want to taste and make some adjustments as you need in terms of maybe a little bit of maple syrup if you feel like it might need a little bit of sweet, or some lemon juice. If you are a fan of spicy, you could even pop maybe a little bit of cayenne pepper in there. So we've got some already in our blender, and you will need a blender for this. The handheld blenders are a little more tedious to use in this, so I would recommend you just go ahead and transfer it into a regular blender. And we're going to go. I will stop talking for a second while we puree this. All right, so now you've got this beautiful creamy, you would think there's like, a cup of cream in there, and there's not whatsoever. I'm gonna, delicious, just delicious. So meanwhile, let's just say our mushrooms are all cooked up. These I did earlier this morning. This is what they look like when they come out of the oven after 20 minutes. Completely different, right, from what we saw in the beginning. They're all shriveled. They're like little bacon bits. It's just, they're so yummy. And so for the final assembly, what I like to do is my bowl, my soup. This is pretty thick, actually. You probably, as it sits, it's going to get thicker. So that's why you need to have some extra broth on hand. And a lovely little topping of crispy shiitake mushrooms. So now I'll come back to you guys so I can answer any questions you might have.
Yeah. So Danielle, can you use any type of mushroom with this, like a Bella or?
Oh yeah. The nice thing with the shiitakes is it's got that sort of earthy, wild mushroom flavor that really complements nicely to the soup. Oh, you want to taste? Yeah.
And
oh yeah.
What? Tastes good.
Oh, you don't need the cream. Definitely don't need the cream.
What if you don't like mushrooms? Is there something else you could put on top?
Oh yeah, you could do some whole grain croutons if you made your own whole grain. Little ones, not big salad croutons, just a little crunch, a little bite of crunch.
I like all those emojis that are coming across.
Yeah, we got all these emojis. People are loving this.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. You're going to really enjoy the taste of this because it's not overpoweringly the celery. You really get the flavor of the fennel coming through as well. So it's a really wonderful combination. Really elegant balance, I would say.
It is. It really is. It tastes so healthy. And, sometimes just after a lot of the eating that we're going to be doing in the next, week to a month, this is a great soup to have on hand because it's fulfilling and it's really satisfying, but it's not heavy. And you don't get really that real, the fennel it blends in, right? I mean, it's not like anything that's overpowering at all. So that's my tip for the day. And
Danielle, can I ask one more quick question before you get going? So in terms of the thickness, you mentioned that it thickens up a little bit. How would you compare the thickness of this to other soups?
how would I compare the thickness in terms of you think the question is like what is the end result that you're after? It should be like, I don't know if you've ever made a vichyssoise, a leek and potato soup. It should be along those lines. You don't want it runny. You want it, yeah, I mean, you want it thick and velvety, but not mashed potato thick.
Right.
And can you add proteins in like chicken and do you have any other herb sort of suggestions for it?
I would not go with adding a protein into this. I think it stands on its own.
But you could use chicken broth.
You could
if
use
you want
chicken
protein,
rather
than vegetable broth.
It's not the kind of soup that lends itself to putting stuff in there. It's a smooth, a colleague of mine refers to some of the soups that she does as that cashmere sweater kind of soup. That's what we're after here. It's just like something soft and that envelops you, and not putting like I said, the crunch, the crisp would be from the shiitakes or a little crouton on top. Mm-hmm.
Right. All you need is that crunch.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's jump into Adrienne's recipe then.
Okay, so I'm going to be dealing with pears today, and we're going to be doing pears. I don't know if you've ever done pears. I know a lot of people do poached pears and roasted pears. We're going to cook them in a pan. So I guess you could call them pan-fried pears, but they are going to be cooked and then dressed up. So we've got 3 different recipes that we're doing here, and they're all going to take a fairly short amount of time. So hopefully we'll get through everything quickly. Each one of them can be done on its own for its own purpose. But today we're going to combine all 3. So for example, you could always do pears. Where's my knife? There it is. You could always do pears, just pears sauteed the way we're going to do them today. And then that can be your dessert. Or you can do the pears sauteed as we're going to do them today and add just the nuts. And we're going to do the nuts today. Or you can do all 3, which is what we're going to show you today. And all 3 is really the way to go if you want a really wonderful holiday dessert of any kind, whether it's going to be, celebratory or just something for the middle of the week when you just want a nice treat for that day. So today I'm going to be using these smaller Anjou pears that I got in a bag. A lot of times the bag pears are smaller, and I like to do the smaller pears for this type of thing because I think that the pears, these are the red pears, which are gorgeous. We're not going to peel these, so you could go either with a colored pear or a green pear. But the larger the pear, of course, that I would think that in this particular case, you want to cut them in quarters if you're doing them inside in a saute pan. So I stick with the small ones, and I'm going to do that today. And we're going to use a melon baller to core the pears.
So I'm going to go ahead and switch you over. So you want to do it so you get a closer look?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to show here. I think we looked.
I think that would be nice. We could see the overhead, so we can see what you're doing with your hands. That'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, here we are. So we're just going to use a small melon bowl. I'm going to use the small one, and we just go right around like this. That's all it takes. You can also, of course, cut them in quarters and take the whole core out, including the stem and the blossom end. But those sort of help hold the pear together a little bit. And I like to just keep it on because I think that it's a little more attractive. But and the other thing is that as you cook these parts sort of melt away, so they don't like get stuck in your teeth like you would think when you're eating it raw. Of course, you don't want any of that in there. But as it cooks, a lot of the elements here, like where the spine is, where the whole center goes through, it can get tough and not pleasant to eat when it's raw. But once it's cooked, it's fine. So all we're doing is taking out the actual seed part and the area inside the seed part that couches the seeds that are a little bit brittle, almost like.
So these pears don't seem to be particularly ripe.
They're not actually. And that's not such a bad thing. You want them so that when you push them, they resist. You know, they're not going to give. You're not going to like make a hole in it if you push it with your thumb. You can hold these until they're a little more ripe, and it could go a little bit faster because you do want to cook them until they're fairly soft. But you could actually do this at any ripeness, apart from it being completely yellow and falling apart, which it would actually continue to fall apart once it's cooked, and I'm not sure you'd really get anything that would look like anything much once you cooked it. So you do want to have them either at peak or a little bit before peak rather than beyond peak. All right, we've got our 4 pears, and we're going to put in some, let me get this heated up. And we're going to heat up these other 2 as well. And then you want to do the other one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Are you done at the?
I think we're done for right now over here. And I'm going to probably move all these over because the rest of the prepping I can do right next to the stove.
So while you're transitioning over to the stove, someone asked if you could maybe do like 2 of each or half and half, red and green. Would you suggest, would that be something that could be interesting looking?
For the butterscotch?
No, for the pears.
For the pears.
Oh yeah, red and green. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yes, I think that would be great. It would be really lovely. You'd have 2 quite distinct colors, and it would be a very pretty setting. So definitely, that's a great idea. And you could get a little bit difference in flavor too. Not as much as you might think, but you know, when you eat them raw, you can really taste the differences. But once they start getting all that they get the cooking going, and you get the other flavors in with it, they tend to be much more similar. You can also use apples. That's another option. So,
awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question. Okay, are we getting over?
Yeah, let's go see what you're going to do next.
All right, here we go. So let's see. Can't really see the ingredients. All right, well, that's all right. Okay, so we're going to start with this large pan over here. We're going to put some butter in there, and that's going to cook just until it's melted. Now on here, I'm going to put some turbinado sugar, which for those of you who don't know is this kind of, let's see, well, I'll put some on the plate. Let's see. It's sugar that has a lot of, it's like kosher salt almost. Because
it's for your pears?
Yes.
Well,
bring it down.
Yeah, going pretty high.
All right, that's okay. We're just going to do this and put it right in there. So we've got some, I just put some sugar on a plate, and all we're going to do is put the rounds on the plate with the sugar, like so. And we don't mind if the butter gets a little bit brown, because that's actually what we're looking for. It's more of a brown butter sauteing of the pears. Each of the pears is going to have some turbinado sugar on it. You don't need much. You just need enough that it's going to really caramelize those apples. Okay? And this, and we're just going to do 2 more here. So 8 pears, obviously we'll do at minimum 8 helpings, but I think you're going to find that you're going to want to give each diner 2 of these because they're so delicious. Okay, here we go. They're all going. Now this will take a little while to get these nice and brown. So while we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and do the nuts. So in this pan, I'm going to go ahead and put my nut meats in here. This is walnuts, but you could use hazelnuts. You can use pecans.
Ooh, pecans.
Yes.
I would love that.
And I'm going to just go ahead and mix my sugar, the same sugar that you had on your plate for your pears. You don't have to add more. Just put a little bit more in there. So you need about a total of maybe 1/4 cup to 1/3 cup of sugar at the very most, but you can also scale back on that. If you'd like your pears really nice and sweet and you're not planning on doing the butterscotch, you want to go a little heavier on the sugar. If you're planning on doing the butterscotch, which is what we're going to do today, you don't want to go quite so heavy on the sugar. So that's what we're going to do here. And then I'm going to yes.
Speaking of sugar, there was a question about using coconut sugar. Would that also work instead of the turbinado?
Yes, it would. Actually, any type of sugar would work for this. I like the turbinado because of the way it sort of melds in with the sugar, but the coconut sugar would do just fine as well. Also, would get a kind of a nice different flavor. You know how that coconut sugar has not quite the same flavor as cane sugar. Is the salt? I saw the salt here a minute ago. Where did it go? Right here, right there. Okay. I do like to salt my walnuts when I'm doing these, so I'm going to put a little bit of salt on here. It just seems to bring out, the flavor of the nuts. Again, this is not something you necessarily need to do if you're going to be serving it with a miso, because the miso butterscotch, because that's going to obviously have salt flavor in it. But when you're doing the nuts and you're using them for lots of different things, you can put them on ice cream. You can put them on you can put them on salads. You can put them on roasted vegetables. I do like to put both the salt and the sugar in there. And
you know what would be a great nut for this is pistachios.
Yeah, I've never tried pistachios. I pretty much stuck with walnuts, hazelnuts, and pecans, but that would be a good one. Yes, you're right.
I think it would be really very wintry too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it already has salt in it, so most pistachios, unless you get raw ones.
How many nuts are you using in this recipe?
It looks to me like probably I got about a quarter of a cup in here. So I'm kind of eyeballing it. What is my I can't remember how much I said. I think I said a quarter of a cup in my recipe. The recipe makes actually more nuts than you're probably going to use on this, unless you're very fond, in which case you can blow it up. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at these. They're not quite brown enough yet. I'll show you up closer if you can see this. You want to get them. Whoops, that's going. This is going. This is starting to smoke, and we don't want it to smoke. So let's turn this off and let it stay in that heated pan.
You want to remove it from the heat completely?
No, I don't think so. I think it's mostly smoking from the sugar, which is fine.
Yeah.
And then we want to spread it on a plate.
Like this?
Like that. Plate. That's excellent.
I can hold it if you want to. You need a pot holder?
Yeah, the pot holder would be great. Thank you. Okay, so these are, the sugar smoking, and it's coated the walnuts really nicely. The salt is in there. It doesn't really need to cook anymore. And if it does, it might burn. So we're just going to put it on a plate and let it spread out there nicely. And put this over in the sink. And that one's good and hot. That one's good and hot. Okay. All right. So we're going to put the cream in here. 3/4 of a cup of cream. And we're going to put 3/4 of butter. This is a butterscotch, so it's got cream and butter in it. That's what you want in a butterscotch.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. And the difference between butterscotch and caramel. Does everybody know the difference between butterscotch and caramel? Do you know the difference, Danielle?
Tell me.
Caramel does not use brown sugar. It uses white sugar. Butterscotch uses white sugar.
Brown sugar. Butterscotch.
Brown sugar. Dark brown sugar for butterscotch. And this is the key to butterscotch. And it's also, to me, the key to making a good caramel butterscotch sauce, because I've never been successful at making caramel sauce. I know people do it, and they're wonderful at it, and it's terrific. And people who do it well or who've done it say that it's not difficult. I just don't have that much luck. So I just go ahead and do a butterscotch sauce, which is not as thick as caramel, but it has all the same flavors that I love. So we're just going to go ahead and let that melt. And meantime, this is still cooking. And we're just going to let it go. This might take a good 10 minutes or so to get these pears to the right degree of the right color. And over here, I'll bring these over. These are pears that I did earlier today. And as you can see, the sugar and butter that I made them in became a beautiful dark, almost a mahogany color. And the actual pears themselves come up the same way. And this is how dark I like to do them, because that really brings out the flavors. This almost got burnt. I think it might have actually gotten a little bit burnt, some of these. I accidentally left the burner on.
You're not supposed to tell your cooking foibles.
Well, you know, I actually do love it like this, so it really worked out for me.
You know what's nice about this, Adrienne, is that you get a real caramelized flavor on your pears, and then it's such a great complement to this butterscotch.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Exactly. So this actually needs to be up a little bit higher, I think, because we want to get it to a nice
simmer.
Got a little bit more of a simmer than we got now. Yep.
It'll come.
And okay, now let's talk about the part of this recipe that deals with miso. Let's see if we can get a good image of that.
Pick it up close to the camera.
There we go. Okay, so this is actually miso in a kind of a cool. Do you think? Okay, in sort of cool packaging. Somebody doesn't like the image. Okay. You could use white miso or you can use dark miso, but I prefer the white miso in this because it's not quite so intense. And the dark miso tends to dominate a little bit more. So if you only have one type of miso, which a lot of people do only have, just use less of it if it's dark, and use the amount that I suggest if it's light. And you should be able to get the balance in that regard. Yes.
Is mellow white miso the same as light miso?
Yes, that is correct. It's called mellow, white, light, sweet. There's lots of different names for it. It's a little confusing, but you will see when you use it. Well, first of all, usually it's packaged so that the packaging itself is a lighter color than the other miso. So that kind of gives you a visual clue. Now this we're going to be doing 1/4 cup.
You need to go ahead and put your sugar in there.
I have to want to put the miso and the sugar together. So we're going to do that, and you will see they're just about the same color. But this is actually considered a light miso. It is almost like a mustard color. So we're going to put that. And the sugar, the brown sugar, 3/4 cup, all at the same time. And this, thank you. There we go.
So what if you don't have any miso? Is there something else you could use with this?
You can do this with adding just some salt, so you get that salty sweet combination. There are salted caramels that do not, that kind of, you get the same effect. That is, the caramel, the sugared caramel with salt in there. So you could substitute and just do some salt. But there's something really quite indulgent about this. It gives it a mellowness. That's so nice.
It does give it a mellowness. It's also the texture of it. It'll thicken up your butterscotch sauce much better than using a sugar-salt combination by itself. But it's not to say that it wouldn't work. And I don't know what the proportions of straight salt would be to get the same effect that the miso produces at the rate of 1/4 cup in this recipe. Do you have one of those? I actually got one right here.
Here, you want a little one?
Yeah, a little one would be good. Thank you. We're just going to get the rest of this out. I don't want to miss any of it. The nice thing about these miso sort of the packaging on this miso is that you get one of these. It doesn't give you a whole huge amount in one of these little package things that the others we've been using, and here it is again, and it keeps forever. So if you buy this just for this, you can use this next year. Right? You can.
Well, miso is a fermented paste.
Yes.
So it does keep forever. And it's actually a very healthy fermented paste.
And is that true for the refrigerated versions and the on-the-shelf sort of versions? Like, I'm assuming that the packet you have there is an on-the-shelf version?
Yes, this is an on-the-shelf version. That's correct.
But once it's been opened, you keep it in the fridge.
I keep this in the refrigerator once it's open. Yes, yes. But I mean, it doesn't take up that much space. The ones that are refrigerated frequently come in fairly large containers because those seem to be the ones that get used by people who do a lot of cuisine that would use or do cuisine that would use a lot of miso or use miso more consistently. And that's typically an Asian type of cuisine like Indian or Thai or I think they need to keep going there. They're not dark enough yet.
Not dark enough yet.
But
okay.
see, the butter is starting to brown.
This
one's pretty good. Yeah, that one's good. And then it does a little dance when you turn it upside down because
it needs to go a little bit longer.
yeah, it does. Yep.
Yeah, when the liquid hits.
No, well, it's actually, I think it's the skin that, I think that one and maybe that one over there next to it. That one might be okay. Can you already check that one? Yeah, there you go. Now we're getting somewhere. These ones over here are
they went in and
okay, so here we are. We've got the miso butterscotch, and that just cooks until it's got kind of a nice glaze to it. And you just have to eyeball it and see. Actually, you can kind of see that shine right there to it. And that's pretty much where you want it to be. Now, you can continue to cook it for a while longer if you want a little thicker. This one is not that thick, but it's certainly got all the flavor that you're looking for already. And so what I would do in a situation like this would just let it sit there and cook for a while longer, maybe another 5 or 10 minutes, and let it go. Because it's going to take at least that long for your pears to continue. But since we've got everything ready, we're just going to go ahead and put some pears on here. How about 3? We'll put 3 of these on here. Pretty? And then I'm going to pour. Woo! I always do that with these wonderful pans.
Here's the stand of the camera.
How's that? 3 of these. Pour little bits over that. And once you taste this butterscotch, you're going to think, why have I ever messed with anything else? This is absolutely the way to go. Sorry, we didn't see a good shot of that. But there we are. And some of these lovely. Okay, let me do it from the other side. These beautiful walnut. There we go.
Lovely.
How's that?
Great.
Let's switch it back over so we can look at it in front of us. Want to do that? There we go.
Okay,
So here we are.
you're back. I've got my
All right.
soup. We've got lunch. We've got soup, and
soup
we
and
have dessert.
Awesome. So we've got a few questions that have come through here.
Okay.
First of which is, Danielle, could you talk a little bit about like the nutrition or health benefits of pears?
Pears.
Yeah.
Pears are full of fiber. They've got good vitamin C. I'm a proponent for not peeling things, so I'm delighted that Adrienne's used this recipe, leaving the peels on the pears. So they're just they're an overall good vitamin C and fiber food to keep in your diet all through the winter.
Great. So could you make a portion, this is for Adrienne, what the recipe you just made, could you make a portion of that ahead of time, or would you have to make it all at once?
It's a great question. You can do all 3 of these in advance. So you can do the pears in advance. Like you could actually do the pears several days in advance. You could do all 3 of these several days in advance. The pears are great for a side. They go well with roasted vegetables, so they're really fun for it to add some flavoring to that. They are wonderful in the onto the fall salads that Danielle was referring to before.
So
you could actually combine the pears with greens and with some of Danielle's shiitake, crispy shiitakes. It would be delicious. So they can be used, on their own. And then the miso butterscotch. Well, once you taste it, you're going to be wanting to put it on everything. And you can actually use it as a base for a sauce for roasted vegetables. You could use it as a base for a vinaigrette, a fall vinaigrette. I mean, it does have that potential because it's a savory sauce. It has both the salt and the sweet. So it doesn't have to just be used on ice cream, though it would be fabulous on ice cream. You could put it on your apple pie. I mean, my God, that would be amazing. It's wonderful with apples, and you could actually do this particular dish with apples rather than pears. I think I mentioned that earlier. The nuts you can use for all sorts of things. Once you have it, you could add them to pies. You can add them to soups. You could add them to salads. Yeah. I always try to get nuts on my salads most of the winter because it really gives you that great crunch. And the salad choices, the lettuce choices aren't as wonderful in the wintertime as they are the rest of the year. So when you're doing those sort of greens that might be a little bit more robust.
Oh yeah, no, the nuts, toasted nuts totally lend themselves to the kale salads and the mustard green salads.
Right.
Absolutely, because it gives it that sweet and nutty, and they're wonderful source of good fats too. So they're very satisfying in that regard.
So we've got some of these pears. I don't know if you can see it, but they're getting nice and dark.
Yeah, maybe if you could hold just one up to camera, or if you want to flip it around, Danielle. I don't know what makes the most sense for you.
Beautiful. Almost a burnish look to it. Let me see. Hang on.
That's good. Yeah, just if you can pull it forward towards the camera a little bit, that would be great.
Go forward towards the camera.
Yep.
Awesome. That's great.
Really pretty burnish color. These are not cooked through yet, however, so they do need to get cooked through. And the way I cook it, if they're somewhat unripe like this one is, or not quite at peak ripeness, it takes a little longer to cook these. And I put a cover on them so that they get soft.
Yeah.
And although you can cook them until they're still, in other words, you can undercook them so there's still a little bit more give. Some people prefer them cooked until they're very soft, and others I think like them when it's still a little crispy. So you can go either way.
Great. Danielle, we talked a little bit about how your recipe basically was vegan. Is there a way that you could make, Adrienne, if there's a way you could make that recipe vegan?
Yes, you absolutely can, because all of the butter that she's used in her recipe, you can use, a vegan substitute butter. There are several really good varieties out there, different brands that you can use. And the cream, you can substitute coconut cream for the regular cream. Now, you will get a different end taste, of course, because with coconut cream, you're going to get that very coconutty flavor. But the miso works great in there, and the sugar is sugar.
And you could make your own cashew cream also if you can do. You can't buy that yet, but I haven't seen that available yet. But there is a way of making cream from cashews.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, I haven't actually tried this kind of dish with cashew cream, but I have done it. I've worked with coconut cream and the butter substitute many times in these kinds of sauces and baking and so forth, and it works just fine.
Yeah.
And you can even throw a little brandy in there.
Yes, that's vegan.
Yeah.
Awesome. So just a couple more quick questions here for Danielle for your soup recipe. Could you put chopped toasted hazelnuts or other nuts on top of that instead of the mushrooms?
Yes, I think probably hazelnuts would not be a bad way to go. Not candied sweet. Don't do that. But you could toast them. You could put a little smoked paprika on them. Maybe even a little bit of cayenne too, if you wanted to, and get that sort of salty toasted Yeah, I think that would be fine.
So as we start to close out, I have one more question for you, and that's just what's a staple in your kitchen for the winter months? So like as we're heading in towards winter, what's a real staple? Someone has asked this in the chat.
Oh, that's a great question.
A staple in my kitchen for winter months, probably maple syrup. I would probably be using that more often than I normally would for the rest of the year, would be maple syrup.
What are some of my go-tos? That's a great question.
I tend to use more onions. So that's something I wouldn't want to run out of.
Well, I do go for a whole lot more dried fruits and nuts than I do other times of the year.
What about dried beans? Is that a staple in your kitchen in the wintertime?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Especially right now. It's just with the cost of ingredients, it just makes sense to have the dried on hand.
It is.
But in terms of a real food, you know what I've been using a lot more of? We were talking about this the other day. Was the harissa, the spicy, the spicy paste and the Tunisian Moroccan very hot spicy paste, which I tend not to use much in the winter. I mean, in the summer as much as the winter for couscous. But there's a soup that I was doing with red lentils and harissa the other day. That was really great.
That was good. So lentils is another one. Lentils and beans, dried beans. I think we probably use a lot of that. The distinction for me would be things that I probably wouldn't be using that much in other seasons, and certainly the dried beans, the dried fruit are all things that I would be using a lot in the winter season. So I hope that answers that question. It's a great question. I do like that.
I just want to say thank you for everything today. These recipes look delicious. I can't wait to try them. Thanks to everyone who attended. Thanks to Danielle and Adrienne for being here. And with that, this is pretty much it. So thanks so much.